At 5. According to you, me, Caroline Voss had 12 minutes to sign the order that would empty Riverton Court. 47 families waited beyond the lobby doors. Mateo Ruiz laid an old rent ledger across the signature line, open to the name she had used 20 years earlier. "You left once," he said quietly. "Don't do it again." Caroline looked at the man she had spent 2 decades avoiding. "Before I decide," she said, "you're going to tell them what you sign." 6 hours earlier, neither knew the truth would cost him his job and her the company. At 11:48 the night before, Mateo was kneeling beside the electrical panel in Riverton Court's east basement when headlights swept across the narrow windows above him. The panel had started buzzing again at 10:30. Mateo had shut down 2 laundry room circuits, moved an oxygen concentrator in Unit 14 to a safer outlet, and called the emergency number on the insurance notice. No one had answered. He had been deciding whether to wake 17 households when a black sedan stopped outside the courtyard. He recognized the Voss Urban Renewal logo on her folder, but not the woman carrying it. She was perhaps 38, dressed for a meeting rather than a basement, and she studied the building without looking away. "Mateo Ruiz?" she asked. He stood, wiping his hands on a shop towel. "If you're here about the inspection, you're 6 hours early. I'm Caroline Voss." That name explained the sedan, the folder, and the 2 people waiting inside the car. It did not explain why the CEO of the company that had bought Riverton Court 11 days earlier was standing in freezing mist at midnight. Mateo glanced toward the dark apartments above them. "People are sleeping, not for long," Caroline said. She did not dramatize the sentence. That made it worse. Inside the basement office, she placed a 12-page document on Mateo's desk. The first page was labeled Emergency Vacancy and Relocation Plan. Beneath it, 47 unit numbers had been divided into 3 columns. Every column ended with the same word, vacate. Mateo read the first page twice. The city notice covers the East Wing. The final safety report arrived at 9:40 tonight. The insurance company won't cover the building under the current conditions. Then repair the conditions. The bank won't release repair money without a signed plan. That sounds like their problem. If nothing is signed by 6, the money for hotels and moving costs could disappear. Mateo looked at her. "So your company created a deadline, and now you want 47 families to pay for it." Caroline's expression tightened, but her voice remained even. "The East Wing has an overloaded main panel, 2 compromised fire barriers, and a smoke control system that failed its final test. 17 households cannot sleep there tomorrow night. I know which units are unsafe. Do the people in them?" The question landed more precisely than an accusation. Mateo closed the folder. "You don't get to walk in here at midnight and ask me that. I do if your signature is on the maintenance records." She opened the folder to a photocopied service log. Mateo saw his initials beside Unit 14's panel, the 3rd-floor fire door, and the mold remediation in Unit 27. Someone had highlighted 3 phrases in yellow: temporarily stabilized, service restored, cleared for occupancy. "Those are not final certifications," Mateo said. "Then why do they read like final certifications?" "Because the old owner refused the full repairs, and the city's software doesn't have a box for safe enough for tonight while I keep calling people who won't answer." Caroline studied him for a moment. "Show me." They began with Unit 14. Mrs. Alvarez opened the door wearing a robe over her nightclothes, her portable oxygen concentrator humming beside the couch. Mateo explained that he needed to test the outlet again. He did not mention the vacancy plan. Caroline stayed in the hallway until Mrs. Alvarez noticed her. "New management?" the older woman asked. Caroline nodded. "Yes." Mrs. Alvarez looked from Caroline's expensive coat to Mateo's open toolbox. "Then you should listen to him before you listen to the people who sold you this place." Caroline did not defend her company. "That's why I'm here." In the bedroom, Mateo showed her where heat had discolored the outlet plate. He had rerouted the concentrator and reduced the circuit load, but the repair was not permanent. Caroline crouched to examine it without concern for her coat touching the floor. "How long has she been living with this?" she asked. 4 days. "And you called it service restored. Power was restored. The panel was not replaced. "Would you let your daughter sleep in this room?" Mateo straightened. "Don't use my daughter to make your point. I'm asking how you measured acceptable risk." "I measured it against Mrs. Alvarez sleeping in her car in January." Caroline rose. "Those weren't the only choices. They were the only choices anyone funded." Back in the corridor, they passed a dent in the plaster beside the stairwell. Caroline's fingers moved toward it, then stopped. Mateo noticed. Something wrong? No. She continued upstairs without waiting. On the third floor, the fire door closed too slowly. Mateo had adjusted the hinge and replaced the closer, but the frame itself had shifted. It would resist smoke. He could not promise how long. Caroline pulled it open and let it swing shut again. "Fourth stair sticks in wet weather," she said. Mateo looked down. Her heel rested one step above the warped tread. "You've been here before." Caroline kept her hand on the rail. "A long time ago." He saw it then, not in the suit or the careful voice, but in the way she held her shoulders when she expected a door to close behind her. "Carrie." She turned. 20 years returned in pieces. A girl on the boiler room steps with algebra homework. Vending machine cocoa. A promise to meet on the roof. An apartment emptied before sunrise. Mateo had imagined this moment when he was 18. In every version, he had known what to say at 39, with 17 unsafe apartments around them. All he could manage was her old last name, Hale. Caroline lowered her eyes for the first time that night. "I use my father's name now. You knew who I was. I saw your name 6 weeks ago, before the sale was final. And you waited until midnight." The final report arrived at 9:40 tonight. That explains tonight. It doesn't explain the 11 days before it. Caroline looked toward the apartments. "I thought I could come back with a repair plan instead of another problem. You decided I should hear from you only after you controlled the ending." She did not defend herself. Yes. Caroline's professional composure slipped, not far, but enough for him to see the girl who used to count every coin before buying cocoa. "I didn't come here to ask you to forgive me." "Good. I came because the East Wing has to close. And I didn't trust anyone else to tell you without turning it into a press release." Mateo looked toward the apartments. "You still haven't told them." "Neither have you." They returned to the basement office at 12:37. Mateo unlocked the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet and removed a black ledger held together with cloth tape. The old owner had moved most rent collection online, but Riverton Court still kept paper reconciliation records for money orders, cashier's checks, and added fees. Mateo opened the book to the first page marked Building Safety and Systems Surcharge. Every household paid between $90 and $120 a month for 3 years, he said. The amount changed with the unit. The notices said it was for electrical, fire barriers, plumbing, and mold. Caroline turned pages. Totals had been carried forward in blue ink. Work order numbers appeared in the margin beside some payments. Most of those numbers had been crossed out. "How much?" she asked. "A little over $186,000. "How much was spent here?" "I can prove 54. Caroline stopped turning pages. Mateo pointed toward 3 boxes of invoices. "The rest went somewhere that wasn't Riverton Court." "Why wasn't this in the records we reviewed before the purchase?" "Ask the people who sold you a clean set of books." "I'm asking the man who kept the dirty ones." Mateo met her eyes. "Because every time I threatened to take it outside the company, they reminded me that my apartment came with my job. Then they reminded me how many tenants had late payments, pets not listed on leases, relatives staying too long, or paperwork they could use against them. So you stayed quiet. I kept evidence. Those are not opposites." He almost closed the ledger, but something on the page held Caroline still. Her fingertips rested beside an entry from 20 years earlier, before the surcharge columns began. Caroline Hale, Unit 3B. 3 late payments. 2 penalties. A final notation in red. Emergency, vacate balance transferred. Mateo had seen the entry before without understanding whose name it was. Now he understood her reaction to the stairwell. Caroline withdrew her hand. You bought the building knowing. Mateo said, I knew the address. That isn't an answer. I wanted to repair it, without telling your board you used to live here. If I had disclosed it before the acquisition, they would have called the purchase sentimental and removed me from negotiations. Was it sentimental? Partly. Caroline closed the ledger carefully. My mother worked 2 jobs and still fell behind. The owner charged her for repairs and then evicted us before they were finished. I built a company that was supposed to stop that. And now you're emptying it. Now I know the East Wing could kill someone. And the hotel money disappears at 6 if I don't sign a plan. You had 6 weeks to call me. Caroline looked at him across the desk. I had 20 years. Neither of them moved. The morning her mother took her away, Caroline had no phone and no control over where they went. That explained the first week, not the years. Later, she found Mateo's address, wrote messages, and deleted them. Shame became pride, pride became silence. I kept telling myself you had moved on, she said. I did. I married someone I loved, he continued. Her name was Elena. We had Sophia. Elena died 4 years ago. None of that was a waiting room for you. I know. No. You know now, Caroline nodded once. You're right. At 1. Tool. Caroline's operations director called. The board wanted her decision by 4. If nothing was signed by 6, the money for hotels and moving costs could disappear. Caroline placed the phone on speaker only after asking Mateo. The director had identified 21 nearby apartments, but only 9 accepted current housing vouchers. Hotels could cover 72 hours. After that, families needed a signed relocation plan to keep receiving help. Mateo pulled a legal pad toward him. 17 East Wing households move first, he said. Not 47. Caroline shook her head. The insurance company still wants a written timetable for the West Wing. A commitment is not an empty building tomorrow. He drew 3 columns: East Wing, West Wing, voluntary move. They listed medical needs, school routes, pets, mobility, and family size. Caroline called an independent safety engineer who agreed to review a 90-day phased occupancy plan with a continuous fire watch and independent monitoring. For the first time that night, the number 47 stopped behaving like a single problem. It became Mrs. Alvarez and her oxygen concentrator, the Jackson boys and their school, Mr. Bell and the bus to dialysis. 12 households wanted to leave but could not afford new deposits. Caroline knew 4 of those details before Mateo said them. How? He asked. I reviewed every relocation intake. CEOs don't review intake forms. This one did. Mateo studied her. Before or after you saw my name? Caroline returned to the list. Before, he waited. I asked for the employee file after, she added. That small correction carried more intimacy than an easier answer would have. At 1. Feinthorn. Mateo called Sophia. She was sleeping at her Aunt Maribel's apartment 2 streets away because Mateo was on emergency duty. He kept his voice low and told her the electrical problem might require some residents to move temporarily. Us too? Sophia asked. Mateo looked at the full vacancy plan on his desk. No, he said. I'm not letting that happen. Caroline turned away, but he knew she had heard. After the call, she stood beside the filing cabinet. You don't know that she needs 1 night without thinking she's losing another home. And tomorrow I give her a better answer. That's what my mother used to say. Mateo's chair scraped the floor as he stood. You don't know how I raise my daughter. I know what it sounds like when fear puts on the voice of certainty. Each had found the other's method of survival and recognized something uncomfortably familiar. At 2, Doriti. They climbed to the roof to inspect the smoke exhaust housings. The rain had stopped. Riverton streetlights shone across wet brick, and the river beyond the warehouses reflected a thin line of orange. Caroline stood near the place where the old access shed had once been. You remembered, Mateo said. The city changed less from up here. You were supposed to meet me by that vent. I remember. I waited until the superintendent threatened to call the police. Caroline looked toward the courtyard. My mother woke me at 4. We left through the south stairwell. And after, I chose not to call. Mateo had wanted an explanation for so long that he had never considered how little relief the true one might provide. Why? He asked. Because you knew the version of me who counted quarters. I wanted to contact you when I had something better to say. Then every year gave me more to explain and less courage to explain it. You made the decision for both of us. Yes, she did not say she had been young. She did not ask him to understand. The absence of an excuse left room for the real injury. Mateo checked the exhaust housing and found the motor operational. Caroline held the flashlight while he tightened a loose bracket. They worked without speaking until she asked whether Elena had liked Riverton Court. She liked people, Mateo said. She hated the plumbing. Caroline smiled despite herself. Reasonable. Elena had been a respiratory therapist. She died from an undiagnosed heart condition. Mateo spent the next 2 years taking every extra shift because repairs were easier than grief. Sophia learned to pack a bedroom faster than any 15-year-old should. I told her Riverton would be the last move. He said, maybe that promise is why you signed those records. Maybe your company refusing repairs is why I had to choose. Both can be true. Mateo looked at her. 20 years earlier, Caroline had been the only person their age who could disagree with him without making him feel small. The ability had survived. At 2:43, the independent engineer called back. West Wing could remain occupied for 90 days if the company replaced 2 fire doors within 48 hours, established a staffed fire watch, isolated the east electrical riser, and submitted weekly reports. The price was high but lower than full relocation. Caroline closed her eyes for one brief second. That gives us 18 households. 17 relocate immediately, Mateo said. 12 choose permanent packages. 18 stay. If the board accepts, will you? Yes. They spent the next half hour building the plan. Caroline found enough money left in the purchase budget to cover 12 months of rent differences. Mateo identified contractors for the fire doors. East Wing families would receive hotels, transport, storage, and written return rights after inspection. At 3, during. Caroline leaned against the edge of the desk, exhausted enough to stop appearing guarded. I didn't come back because of the building alone, she said. Mateo's pen stopped. Outside the office, water moved through old pipes. Someone upstairs crossed a floor. Then everything settled again. Then why did you come? He asked. Caroline looked at him. For a moment, the CEO, the superintendent, and the deadline fell away. Her phone rang before she answered. The board chair had joined the company lawyer on the call. Caroline put the phone to her ear rather than the speaker. Mateo watched her posture change. She listened for nearly a minute before saying, no. Full vacancy is no longer the only safe option. Another pause. Because I have an independent engineer willing to sign the conditions. The voice on the other end grew loud enough for Mateo to hear without understanding the words. Caroline's eyes moved to the ledger. There is also evidence that the seller took repair money collected from tenants, she said. When the call ended, Caroline asked Mateo for the original ledger. You can photograph it here, he said. The company lawyer needs the original and a signed record of who handled it. The lawyer works for the company. So do I. That isn't reassuring. Caroline did not argue. She removed a written receipt from her folder and signed it. It stated that she had received the ledger intact, that all pages would be preserved, and that no extract would be released without context. She turned the receipt toward him. I am asking you to trust me with it. He handed her the ledger. At 3:20, the company lawyer called again. The former owner had learned about the ledger. If Caroline publicly accused him before 6, he would ask a judge to block the relocation money. Without that money, the 17 East Wing families would have hotel rooms for one night and nothing after. The lawyer offered another way. Release Mateo's 3 maintenance records first. Suspend him. Tell the public that the missing repair money was still being examined. The bank would keep paying for hotels while the company investigated. And Mateo takes the blame, Caroline said. For 48 hours, the lawyer replied. Caroline could have returned to the office and asked him. She did not. Release the records, she said. She believed she was protecting the families. She also knew Mateo would be the name people saw first. At 3:14, Mateo's access card stopped working. He was returning from checking the boiler when the basement door flashed red. At the same moment, his phone filled with messages. A local tenants group had received the company statement. Someone had posted the highlighted certifications beside Mateo's photograph from Riverton Court's website. Building superintendent suspended over safety records. He read the statement once, then walked into the office. Caroline was standing beside his desk. The ledger was inside a sealed evidence sleeve. Tell me you didn't approve this. She did not insult him with a denial. The relocation reserve would have frozen. You promised no extract without context. I have 48 hours to force the full record out. You had 30 seconds to ask me. And if you said no, Mateo stared at her. That is what asking means. Caroline's face changed as the truth reached the place where intention could no longer protect her. 17 families would have lost their rooms. So you decided I could lose my name. Temporarily. Mateo laughed once. Without humor, you still think temporary damage belongs to the person who plans to repair it. Mateo, I believed you this time. At 4:02, lights came on across Riverton Court. The company statement had reached the tenant group, and the tenant group had reached every household. People came into the lobby in coats, pajamas, work uniforms, and slippers. Some wanted Mateo reinstated. Others wanted to know why he had called unsafe units stable. Everyone wanted to know whether they would still have a home by nightfall, because Mateo's card had been disabled. He stood outside the maintenance office while a security contractor took his keys. Mrs. Alvarez watched from a lobby chair. You knew about my outlet, Mateo answered carefully. I knew the repair was temporary. Did you know it could burn? I knew the panel could overheat. The older woman looked away. She did not shout. Her disappointment was worse. At 4:17, Maribel arrived with Sophia. Sophia had seen the company statement on her phone. She wore jeans, sneakers, and Mateo's old canvas jacket over her pajamas. She did not run to him. She waited until they were alone in the courtyard. Are we moving? She asked. Mateo looked toward their third-floor windows. Maybe. You said no. I thought I could stop it. That isn't what you said. He started to explain the East Wing, the funding, and the signatures. Sophia shook her head. Was our apartment safe? Yes. Were all of theirs? Mateo could not give the same answer. Sophia pushed her hands into the jacket pockets. You always tell me not to promise something just because I'm scared someone won't like the truth. He heard Elena in the sentence, though Sophia had made it her own. You're right, he said. She looked surprised, then angrier, because agreement did not repair the damage. I need you to stay with Aunt Maribel until the meeting is over. Don't promise me it'll be okay. Mateo nodded. I won't. Tell me what you can promise. He took a breath. I'll tell everyone exactly what I did. I'll listen when you're ready to tell me what it cost you, and wherever we live next. You're staying in robotics. Sophia's eyes filled, but she did not cry. That's better. She left with Maribel without looking toward Caroline. At 4:36, the board chair gave Caroline one final option. The board would approve the three-group plan and keep Caroline as CEO if she signed a statement saying the company had relied on inaccurate site certifications during acquisition. Mateo would carry primary responsibility. The diverted surcharge would remain under confidential audit until the seller dispute was resolved. Caroline would keep her position. 17 families would receive relocation support. 18 could remain during repairs. 12 could accept permanent packages. Only the truth would be divided. The board chair reminded her that losing control might produce a worse outcome. Another executive could restore full vacancy. The argument appealed to the part of Caroline that had built a life around staying in the room where decisions were made. "I need the statement by 5:15, he said. Across the lobby, Mateo was speaking with the independent engineer. Caroline saw him glance toward her and then away. At 4:20, Mateo found the document that could remove Caroline from the decision. The purchase paperwork had asked whether Caroline had any personal tie to the building. She had signed without mentioning that Riverton Court was her childhood home. Mateo had the old ledger entry and a copy of that form. If he sent both to the bank, Caroline could lose her authority before 6. The full vacancy plan might be delayed. The money for hotels, moving costs, and repairs might also be frozen. A tenant organizer offered to publish the documents. Mateo looked at Caroline's old name, her late payments, and the red notation that recorded the worst morning of her childhood as an accounting event. "No," he said. The organizer stared at him. "She just put your records online. Then I know exactly what this would be." It proves she lied. She gets to tell them where she lived. I'll tell them what she signed. Mateo returned the ledger copy to the folder. Caroline had approached quietly enough to hear the last sentence. "Why?" she asked after the organizer left. Mateo faced her. "Because what you did to me was wrong." She absorbed the answer. "I'm not going to prove it by doing it to you." For the first time since her decision at 3:20, Caroline's eyes lost their defenses. Mateo saw gratitude there, but also something more painful. Recognition that he had protected her right to choose at the exact moment she had denied him the same. "The board offered to keep the plan if I blamed the certifications," she said. "You don't need my permission to decide." "No, that's the first honest thing we've agreed on in an hour." At 5:09, the lobby became a meeting room. Folding chairs filled the space between the mailboxes and the front doors. Those who could not find seats stood along the walls. The independent engineer placed the building map on an easel. 3 colors marked the proposed outcomes: red for 17 East Wing households, amber for 18 West Wing households, and blue for 12 voluntary relocations. No color meant untouched. Caroline sat at a folding table with the unsigned order, the amended plan, and the sealed ledger. Mateo stood near the back because he was no longer an employee and did not believe he had earned the front of the room. Residents asked questions for 20 minutes. Would children remain in the same schools? Yes, transportation was funded. Would temporary relocation become permanent without consent? Not under the amended plan. Could East Wing families return? Only after independent inspection, with the right written into the agreement. Would those who moved permanently receive enough to rent nearby? For 12 months, including deposits and moving expenses. What happened after 12 months? No one offered a comforting lie. They did not know. At 5:03, the company lawyer texted Caroline. 17 minutes remained before the hotel, and moving money could disappear. She placed the phone face down. At 5:40, Caroline Voss had 12 minutes to sign the order that would empty Riverton Court. 47 families waited beyond the lobby doors and along its walls. Mateo Ruiz walked to the table and laid the old rent ledger across the signature line, open to the name she had used 20 years earlier. "You left once," he said quietly. "Don't do it again." The room did not understand the whole sentence. Caroline did. She looked at the man she had spent 2 decades avoiding. "Before I decide," she said, "you're going to tell them what you signed." Mateo turned to the residents. He did not begin with the missing money. He began with himself. He identified all 3 records. He explained the temporary repairs in ordinary language. The fire door closed but might not hold long enough. The electrical panel worked but could overheat. The mold had been cleaned where they could see it. not fully removed behind the wall. He told them why he had signed. He had seen families lose shelter after earlier inspections. He had believed keeping people inside while pressing for repairs was kinder than giving them information that might force them out. I told myself I was protecting you, he said. But I decided what risk you could live with before I told you what the risk was. That part belongs to me. He resigned as superintendent effective immediately. The investigation could decide what happened to his certification. He did not ask the residents to defend him. Mrs. Alvarez raised one hand. Would you sign those records again? Mateo looked at her. No. Because you got caught. Because you should have been the one deciding whether that outlet was safe enough for one more night. Mrs. Alvarez did not forgive him. She nodded because he had answered. At 5:23, Mateo stepped away from the table. Caroline opened the sealed ledger. She told the residents how much they had paid and how little could be traced to repairs. She explained that Voss Urban Renewal had bought the property and its unresolved liabilities. She did not hide behind the seller. Then she described the choice she had made at 3:20. She had authorized the release of Mateo's certifications without the denied work orders or surcharge records. She had done it to keep relocation money available. She had known his reputation would absorb the first impact. I believed I could correct the record later, she said. That was the same as deciding his right to the truth could wait. It could not. Finally, Caroline told them why her old name appeared in their ledger. She did not make her childhood a qualification for forgiveness. She said only that she had once been removed from Unit 3B before dawn, that she later had chances to contact someone she had left behind, and that she chose silence because shame felt easier than responsibility. I built a company because I never wanted another owner to decide that people like my mother were an acceptable loss. She said, Tonight I made that calculation about Mateo. She placed the board statement beside the unsigned order. If I sign this version, I remain CEO and he carries the public blame. I am not signing it. At 5:26, Caroline called the board chair on speaker. She declined the proposed statement and disclosed her personal connection to Riverton Court. The chair informed her that the board would suspend her authority as soon as the call ended. I can still sign until you remove my authority in writing, Caroline said. For 3 minutes, he replied. That's enough. She ended the call. The amended plan was not a miracle. It did not make the East Wing safe, guarantee every family would return, erase Mateo's signatures, or restore the money. It did something narrower and more honest. 17 households would leave the East Wing that morning for funded temporary housing, with written return rights after independent clearance. 18 West Wing households could remain for 90 days under a staffed fire watch and phased repairs. 12 households could choose permanent relocation with deposits, moving costs, and 1 year of rent difference support. A tenant-elected committee, not Mateo, not Caroline, would oversee the process with the independent engineer. At 5, Caroline signed. At 6, written notice of her suspension arrived. No one applauded. 17 families still had to pack. Mateo had to surrender his keys. Caroline faced a board investigation. Truth had not prevented loss. It had stopped 2 frightened people from choosing who else should carry it. By 7:30, buses and 2 moving vans had arrived. Mateo helped Mrs. Alvarez label her oxygen equipment only after asking whether she wanted him to. She said yes to the labels and no when he offered to carry her personal bag. Sophia returned after breakfast. Mateo told her their West Wing apartment could remain occupied for 90 days. But he no longer had the job that came with it. They might still have to move. Okay, she said. He waited for anger. I'm still mad, Sophia added. I just don't need you to fix that part for me. Mateo nodded. Okay. It was the least impressive answer he had ever given his daughter, and one of the most honest Caroline left Riverton Court through the south doors. Mateo saw her pause in the courtyard, but he did not follow. Recognition was not absolution. Whatever existed between them would have to survive consequences before either of them named it. 3 months later, the East Wing remained closed. 9 of the 17 households had chosen to wait for repairs. 8 had accepted permanent apartments elsewhere. All 18 West Wing households had completed the 90-day period without a safety incident. Though 6 later chose relocation packages, the audit recovered part of the diverted surcharge and placed a claim against the former owner for the rest. Mateo's certification was suspended for 6 months. He was not rehired as superintendent. The residents elected him to 1 seat on the transition committee only after he disclosed every maintenance record under review. Caroline remained CEO after an independent review removed her from acquisition decisions for 6 months and required new disclosure controls. She attended Riverton meetings only when the tenants agreed she should remain. Sophia entered the regional robotics program. She and Mateo moved into a smaller apartment 4 blocks away when his employee housing ended. She hated the kitchen and liked the bus route. Mateo did not call the move permanent. He called it where they lived now. On the evening of the final 90-day meeting, Caroline returned the restored ledger to the tenant committee. Every missing invoice, denial, and transfer had been attached. No page stood alone without its context. When the room emptied, Mateo found her beside the lobby doors. "You still owe me a goodbye," he said. Caroline looked toward the courtyard. "I was hoping for something less final." Mateo checked the time. "Sophia's at robotics until 8. There's a diner 2 blocks over." Caroline waited. "This isn't about Riverton Court," he added. "Are you asking me on a date? I'm trying to—" A small smile reached her face. "Then ask me again when we get downstairs." They walked toward the elevator without touching. Mateo could not promise where the evening would lead. Caroline could not guarantee she would never leave again. For once, neither mistook certainty for love. The elevator doors opened. This time, they stepped inside after telling each other the truth.